Hello, beautiful souls. This is Quinn Curtis, and you are listening to the Inflow on Fire podcast. And today I am really excited to dive in a little bit to a myth that I think is really profound and powerful. Now, some of you may know this about me, but many of you, this might be a surprise, but I absolutely adore mythology and fairy tales. A huge fan of Jungian psychology. And I just love, love, love how stories and myth really can help open us and really help us understand where we are and guide us on our inward journeys as well as our outer journeys in ways that just physically telling somebody how to do it doesn't always do. So, for example, some classic myths that we find in societies all over the world would be the myth of Cinderella, and this idea of a girl who is struggling and she's had really difficult life circumstances. She sees a way out, or a way out presents itself to her. In many of those stories, it is something to do with a prince and being kind of rescued out of poverty by this prince. And then she takes those leaps of faith and makes those choices that then she shows up to the ball or to the situations and says yes to her bigger destiny, yes to something better and improving her life. And so while there is a lot of criticism to some of those stories, the actual roots of the Cinderella story are really profound and powerful about just even our inner journey, because whenever we're looking at mythology and fairy tales, especially from the Jungian psychology perspective, which I think is really, really helpful to look at, all of the players in the myth and the fairy tale are some part of ourselves. And so in the Cinderella myth, it wasn't ever intended to mean that you're only going to be okay if some knight in shining armor comes and finds you and whisks you off your feet, takes you to your perfect life, but more about saying yes to maybe some of those masculine guiding forces within yourself and aligning those to the deeply feminine, receptive, beautiful parts within yourself as well, and having that union of the masculine and feminine to help you move into a greater state of wholeness, or having that actualize you more as a person. I'm trying to give this in a very short synopsis because this wasn't the story that I wanted to necessarily go into deeply today, but just a little bit of a taste of why I think myth can be so powerful. Because then when we are having a really difficult situation in our lives and we're maybe listening to a self-help book that's like, we'll use myself as an example for a minute. I had, a really difficult situation with my work a couple months ago and my career path. And, there was a part of me that was outwardly looking for like, what's going to fix this or what's going to make this right. And then, the Cinderella myth and kind of thinking about that and just even the way that the Cinderella myth allows us to say yes to what we really want, or encourages that against all odds. We're doing what we feel we were called to do. We're taking that action. We're showing up to the ball. We are saying yes to the dress, right? All the things can be more motivating and more inspiring on like a core soul level than somebody just telling you should follow your heart, you should follow your dream. So just depends on where we're at. I think that there's always a space for great advice and counsel and support. And I also think that stories are a really powerful way to open us up to really internalizing and activating those parts of ourselves that can help us to move forward more in alignment with where we are wanting to go in life. So there's a really cool myth that I love, or parables, myths, fairy tales. I consider them all in this similar genre. And this parable that I love is, I've heard it in lots of different ways. And the one that I found that I want to share with you is actually quoted as a Jewish parable. And I'm going to just read it directly because I think that the way that the author wrote it is so beautiful, and it's just a short parable. But the author is Rachel of ourbuzzards.blogspot.com. Looks like her blog is not even active necessarily anymore, but this parable is a gem, and I'll post a link to it in the comments if you want to refer to it as well. So you may have heard this in one frame or another. So if you're hearing it again, such a good reminder to internalize those concepts as well. So once a man lived in his small house with his wife and 6 children. The house was loud and crowded. There was no peace to be found. For years, his ever-patient wife heard his complaints, shouldering the burden until one day she asked him to go speak to the rabbi. The man went to his rabbi. Rabbi, we are too many. Our house is too small. There is too much noise. I cannot think. I cannot breathe. What do I do? The rabbi instructed him to go home and bring his 6 chickens inside his house. The man went home and did as he was told. 3 days later, he returned to the rabbi. Rabbi, we are now even more. The chickens are pecking away. They poop on our floor. It's louder and messier. Go home and also bring your goat into the house, the rabbi instructed. The man went home and brought the goat into his house. However, after 3 days, he went running back to the rabbi. The goat is eating our furniture. He rams into our legs. Things have only gotten worse. Rabbi answers, go home and bring your cow into the house as well. The man went home and brought the cow inside the house. 3 days later, he went back to the rabbi once again. Rabbi, the house is filthy and reeks of manure. We can barely move around all the animals. The snorts and moos and sounds of the animals breaking wind keep me awake all night. Rabbi, this is terrible. Go home and remove all the animals from your house, the rabbi says. The man went home and did as he was told yet again. 3 days later, he returned to the rabbi, nearly skipping the entire way, joy radiating from his face. Rabbi, thank you so very much. We removed the animals. Our house is clean and calm and quiet now. A man can find rest within its walls. Now, I love this parable because I swear this has so many themes that show up so frequently in my experience of life. One of them being that oftentimes our lives can feel really suffocating and our experience can feel like we are so stuck. And so lots of times we're even like hoping things will get better. And I swear sometimes the universe just brings in more and piles in more. And so I'm loving and really appreciating in my life right now that those experiences of more, and this is too much, and it's, there's no space, there's no breathing room, provide really fantastic contrast to then help us really appreciate those moments when we simplify and we pare down and have more space and more breathing rooms in our lives. But one example of how this showed up in my world, because I think that that's a really important part of this podcast, is that I'm going to bring my stories and bring in others who have their stories as well, in an attempt to show like, what does this look like in practicality, or what can this look like? Because I think in hearing each other's stories, it gives us courage and helps us to honor what's happening in our own life. It helps to normalize that lives are messy and magical and crazy and creative and incredible, right? All the things, which can help us to really not wrestle with our lives so much, but really be more in flow with our life, like we're after, and on fire with gratitude and joy and appreciation and that divine spark of creativity and passion in our life. So one of the ways that it showed up is a couple years ago, I had this dream sparked of moving to Ireland someday. And in my mind, like moving to Ireland was going to solve everything. And so I really started looking seriously at this, especially this year, and just wanted to really process and digest, like, well, how could this happen? And maybe like, why am I still living my life here when I could have this perfect, amazing life in Ireland that I've been envisioning, which I can't even say without laughing because of course, but this is how it happens in our heads, right? Where we're like, oh, everything will be amazing and perfect. So I just started saying, well, let's let ourselves dream about it. Let's let ourselves envision what it looks like, what it feels like, what does an everyday experience there look like? What does what does the mundane look like in that experience? It's something I always like to ask myself whenever I'm drawn to create something or experience something, is like, what does the main mundane aspect look like? Because lots of times, I don't know about you, but I get very entranced by the kind of mystical, magical, exciting parts of it. But then when it's in the actual mundane of the everyday life of it, then, what does it look and feel like? And another question I love to ask myself about those times as well, or those fantasies or dreams, is, well, what happens the day after that's achieved? And is that something that I want and I'd be excited about? So that's where I was really pouring a lot of my visualization and energy into, was just imagining my life there. And I was envisioning, man, if we move to Ireland, we will have to get rid of most of our belongings. And so I started to look around at my house and just say, like, kind of emotionally feel, could I let go of things? And like, how much of the things that we have in our life are so precious that I would be devastated? Would that be a deal breaker for me? And so I started to look around the home and I saw, gosh, our house is so cluttered with stuff. There's just stuff everywhere. Like, so many projects, and like I can't keep certain rooms in the house clean, or our closets are overflowing. And whatever else I looked at, I just kept seeing so much stuff. And so I started to just check in and like, God, do I have an emotional connection to any of this stuff? Is this going to be a deal breaker? And I recognized how liberating and freeing it would feel to actually let go of most of our stuff, if not almost all of our stuff. And so it really was opening my eyes to, why am I hanging on to all this stuff? Why is it in my space? And I will say, we are not, I feel like we probably have the average abundant American family experience, meaning that I highly recognize that I'm coming from a very privileged perspective with talking about our stuff and how it accumulates. And am not saying this from a hoarding perspective by any means, although I do believe we all hoard a little bit, right? But, or a lot of us do. And so I was just seeing the ways that I had been hanging on to stuff and was evaluating, what if this stuff means anything to me? And what really came to mind is seeing that my life has been full of quite a bit of stress for a long time. And, for one part of that had looked like working 60-hour weeks the majority of the past 15 years. And being the primary breadwinner and having that pressure on my shoulders, and so many, things, raising 5 kids. It's a lot of kids, and it's amazing, and I love it, and it's a lot. And so just feeling like all of this stuff was actually insulation to try to insulate myself against the pain or the stress that I was feeling about my life, but wasn't directly addressing. And so I was recognizing, like, man, if I just keep buying more stuff, or we just keep filling our home with more stuff, like, that doesn't improve our quality of life. It actually maybe just insulates and makes us more numb to feeling our life, or more distracted from our life. And so I had this vision of in Ireland, where we're all arriving with like our couple of suitcases each, and we've shipped some things there, but we are mostly living a very minimalist, simple life. And I saw how good it felt, how liberating it was to say yes to only keeping the things that we love. Very Marie Kondo, joy of tidying up. And how much more connection that would invite into my life with my family, because we would have, so much less stuff in the way of connecting. And so it was just really opening my eyes to, how good that home in Ireland would feel with so few things. So this naturally, thank goodness, led to the idea of, well, why not now? Why can't I experience that in this house right now that we have? Why can't I have that kind of freedom and peace of mind? And I even was recognizing the areas that were really messy in our house, or that like just felt like we could never quite keep them cleaned up, that those areas were were areas where we genuinely had more than we could handle. And so I realized, like, man, it might be healthy to keep taking away possessions and like letting go of possessions until we find the amount that we can naturally handle in our home and feel really at peace with, meaning we can naturally pick it up and keep it tidy. We've had a couple of really, really big homes in our past, or they were really, really big for us. And that was something that kind of surprised me about them, is I just thought, oh, more space is going to be amazing. But more space is also more space to clean up, more space to add more stuff to. And moving into the home we're in now, one of the reasons that I was really attracted by it is there wasn't a ton of storage space. So I knew we'd need to be really wise with what we had. And it doesn't have a lot of excess space or excess rooms. And if any, it doesn't have any excess bedrooms, but some of our homes have had like a huge family room area or something. And we just don't have that in this house. And I kind of have loved that, but still we were getting so much stuff. So I was just watching those areas in my home in this house where we had more than we could handle. And I noticed the kitchen was one of those spaces where my cupboards with appliances and gadgets and drawers of things were just overflowing. And I was having a hard time keeping things closed. Our kitchen pantry, ironically, I remembered that years and years ago, there's a scripture somewhere that talks about, opening the windows of heaven, that there won't be room enough to receive the blessings. And I was like, I want that. That's exactly what I want. And so I had this hilarious moment where I realized, wow, well, we have that. Like, look around at the house, see the cupboards that are overflowing and the closets that there is not room enough to receive everything that's in those closets, and let alone find what we need. And so it was a really fascinating moment to reevaluate my definition of abundance as well, and realize that a bunch of stuff doesn't mean abundance, and can actually like get in the way of me feeling connected to life and feeling really connected to the natural abundance. I realized that the definition of abundance I prefer now is that we have enough for our needs and desires when we need it, and that anything else we can let go, we can let it flow through us. And so it felt so good. I went through, and over the course of a couple months this summer, I started letting stuff go. I was on a letting stuff go rampage. I went through the closets. I went through the kitchen. I went through our bookcase down in our family room, and I was stunned. I was like, why is this thing always such a mess? The books are everywhere. Don't the kids care? Well, when I removed all the books that we weren't like really, really attached to and didn't love, we removed at least 4 laundry baskets of books. And what was so neat is that my husband's cousin works at an inner city elementary school in our area that is always looking for beautiful donations and things like that. And he was so excited to take all of those books to their library. So it was also an interesting moment of recognizing, man, all this stuff that I'm keeping in my life, like how much of it could be out serving and blessing somebody else's life, and instead of just me hoarding it and hanging on to it as a sense of insulation or safety or protection or feeling abundant, right? And so it was just a continual experience every time we would let go. By my latest run, I just took this massive, it like filled the back of our van, huge box of these big, like they're like the American Girl dolls that they sell at Target. Our generation dolls, I think they're big dolls, and all of their stuff is really big too. And it was just such joy to go and take it to our local Goodwill and feel so excited about the little kids who are going to find those dolls and those toys and are going to be so excited by them. So there's just, this is a big premise of this show as well. And just one of my fundamental core beliefs is that we are not going to solve the problems in the world that we want to. Like, world hunger doesn't go away. Kids going hungry, not having water, sex trafficking, war, violence. Like, there's so many big problems that I know are a big concern for all of us. And I'm just seeing so strongly, at least within myself, and would love to hear if you can relate, that while I am in a survival mindset within myself, and I'm trying to hang on to whatever I can to survive and like make it in life and have an okay life, that's keeping me from being able to share my abundance and show up and serve in the ways that are really going to make a big impact in the world. So I really believe that the more and more we in Western society can get out of survival in our minds, which really, I heard the best definition of this from Michael Singer recently in his lectures on the untethered soul. He defines survival mode as continually being in a state of avoiding what you don't want and trying to hang on to what you do want. Boom, like mic drop right there. Is there I don't know that there's a better definition of that, because we can all relate to that on some level. And that is ultimately when we're so caught up in that struggle internally of trying to avoid and like keep away or be afraid of the things we don't want in our life and trying to cling to the things that we do. It keeps us so in survival mode that we miss life. We're not in flow and on fire. And thus we're not bringing out our genius and our magic and being able to show up and serve the world in the ways that we could. I really believe that the solutions to all the world's problems are here right now, and we could access them, but it is our own survival like consumption in our minds and in our societies that are limiting that capacity to go and liberate those who are truly in survival, who truly, don't know where they're going to get their next meal or how to not get beaten or hurt, right? Like there's so many people in the world who could use real support and help, and just everybody who is struggling. I have so much empathy for just the struggle of the everyday grind, and how much of it just really can beat us down. Life, it can be so hard and challenging. And I think that the more we're in that survival mode as well, inside of our heads, where we're really afraid of life and really anxious about life, and yet we're just clinging to the few things that kind of bring us joy, which could be food or could be whatever it could be. It's been food in my world, could be stuff. It could be a job that we don't really love, but we want to cling to that income, right? There's so many ways that we try to cling onto things instead of actually letting life flow, letting life support us, and letting life help us create that breathing room. And so I really am excited about this parable and just bringing this in and talking about it today, because I hope it inspires you to look at the areas of your life where they are feeling like you don't have breathing room, or you're feeling like, man, we just really like, we've got to get out of this situation. And like, hopefully, recognize that there's two ways to always look at that. There's the, well, how could this situation get even more uncomfortable and painful? And even finding yourself like thinking about that can give you some good contrast to then say, okay, see, like what we're doing, what we're experiencing is better than that. That's amazing. And I think that's healthy too. A lot of the old Stoics would practice intentional discomfort because they believed that a lot of us are going around chasing comfort so much that it really limits our capacity to actually be present and to be in flow with life and to have a clear mind, and to and they felt like they were in a prison to their preferences and what they were going after. And so I think that there's a lot of wisdom to that. They would intentionally say, okay, today we're going to live like we are really, really destitute. Today it's freezing cold outside, and we're going to intentionally not wear our coat to remind us how great it feels that we have coats, that we have that blessing in our life, that we have warmth and a warm home, and we can be pondering on that while we're experiencing this lack of that. And so I think that also, definitely a lot of the Stoics had pretty hard lives. Life was just hard back then anyways, which is another little rant, or another soapbox item that literally, if we look at all the ways the society has improved, we are safer, healthier, more stable and at peace than we ever have been in the history of the world. That doesn't mean that we, or at least in the history of the past couple thousand years, right? It doesn't mean that we don't still have problems. We absolutely do. But things that used to be major struggles just aren't anymore. My doctor was just reminding me recently that there was a 50% mortality rate when smallpox came out, right? A 50% mortality rate, and it hit kids and babies, right? It's like there just aren't childhood diseases like that. Thank goodness. The closest we've had was COVID, and it wasn't even that. So thankfully, like, we have just come so far as a society, but are we yet enjoying those fruits of all those centuries of working towards a better future that our ancestors and everybody before us has put in? Or are we still just as scared and just as stressed as our ancestors were thousands of years ago, when the threats to their life and their peace and safety were so much greater than what we experience? So I think that survival mode that is happened ever since then has been passed down to us, and that we have to actively choose out of it. And I think that a parable like this can be a good reminder to us of just how sweet and good our lives already are. And if we think about attracting and bringing in more good things into our life, what better way than to really appreciate and honor what we have? And sometimes it is the clutter in our homes, or it is the clutter in our schedules, or it is clinging and hanging on to things that aren't good for us, that can limit us from actually really feeling the good that is in our life right now and all the greatness that is here already. This showed up as well in my life with our schedule. I felt like we have just been running around like crazies. My husband and I were both working full time, with my job being especially demanding and running my own business being especially demanding before that. And for example, I didn't make it to any of my high school age daughters' club volleyball games the entire past season last year, because I was so busy working. And my kids' events felt more like a burden than like something I was excited about. And now I'm staring right into my son's senior year of high school. I'm about to say goodbye and have the last event of every event that he experiences this year. And so it's really making me look at how my house has been so full, my metaphorical house of my schedule, right? My space has been just so full of commitments that it feels so, so good to just clear out that space and renounce my old addiction to busyness, and now actually enjoy and savor what's in my life and what has been in my life all along, but that had been too full of other stuff to actually feel it and see it. So I hope this inspires you today. Definitely a parable that I think is good to remember frequently, of both helping us, make space for what we really want and prioritize that, as well as recognizing those moments in our life where life might just be really full, so that we will honor and appreciate when it's really not full, or vice versa, when we're feeling like our life is kind of quiet and empty and then it fills back up again, to just be mindful of letting our life fill up with things that fill us and support us, that we enjoy, and to show up with gratitude, those things, and then to let the other stuff go, that we don't need it, that we can be perfectly abundant and happy with relatively simple means. And I'm still on this journey myself. This is a practice, not a perfect, but I hope it inspires you today. Have an awesome day. I'm cheering you on in living in flow and on fire.